and their voices start getting louder over each other. And then this verse was revealed. Do not put yourselves in front of Allah and His Messenger. Right? We learned a couple of things. Number one, the companions were human beings. They were the best human beings, but they were human beings. And sometimes we tend to put the companions on a pedestal, on a level that's impossible to be reached, and so we give up and say we can't be like that. We can't do what they're doing. And that's wrong. They're the best, don't get me wrong. Don't take this out of context. They're the best human beings, and we won't be like them. But at the same time, they made mistakes, and they said things, and Allah has corrected them. They're not sinless like the prophets. This is a very important point. Because when we understand this, we can have a personal relationship with the companions. We can understand where they're coming from. Umar radiallahu anhu, when he was the Khalifa, when he was the leader of the Muslims, a man came to him to complain about his wife. And when he came, he heard that his wife was raising her voice against Umar. And so he went away. Umar heard that there was someone at the door. He said, "You come back. What were you doing?" He said, "Oh, Amir al-Mu'mineen, I came to complain about my wife. But then I heard your wife's, giving you a hard time. So I left it." And he started laughing. And he said, "Yeah, he said, oh person, she takes care of my family. She runs the affairs of my house. Should I not be easy with her and let her relieve her frustration?" SubhanAllah, they're human beings and we need to understand this, okay? So this verse was revealed. "O you who believe, do not put yourselves forward in front of Allah Azza wa Jalla and His Messenger." The word in Arabic is not translated like this. And I'll tell you why that's important. In Arabic, it says, for those that understand Arabic, maybe you'll appreciate this a little bit more, but I'll translate it with my best ability in English. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تُقَدِّمُوا بَيْنَ يَدَيِ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ الْمَفْعُولُ بِهِ لَمْ يُفْهَمْ. Right? So it says, "O you who believe, do not put forward blank in front of Allah and His Messenger." That's how you would translate it. Do not put forward in front of Allah and His Messenger. The object is not mentioned. Do not put forward what? It's not mentioned. And this is very beautiful. Allah Azza wa Jalla does this so that we can, this is Tafsir Razi says this, so that we can put our own object in there. Because for every person, you may put something in front of Allah and His Messenger without knowing. It may be a person's culture. It may be their opinion. It may be their emotions. It may be their family. You fill in the blank. There's another verse that Allah Azza wa Jalla does this as well, where the verb is not mentioned. And it's the first person in the Quran. What's the first person in the Quran? What is it? First person in the Quran. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the especially merciful. This is not a complete sentence. There's something missing. There's no verb. Where's the verb? In the name of Allah, the most beneficial, the most merciful. Okay, what are we doing? It's so that we can insert what we want. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, aqra. Bismillah ar-Rahim. Bismillah ar-Rahim. Bismillah. Whenever you say Bismillah, insert your verb with it. Does that make sense? So that we can have this personal relationship with the book of Allah. Right? So look for these small things. Sometimes in translation it's lost, but inshallah, as I said, I'm doing my best to convey what's the meaning. And so, a lot of the times we put our own opinion, sometimes subconsciously, in front of what Allah Azza wa Jalla and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam say. And this is a big mistake. Because we're assuming the position of God. Even though we don't mean it, but sometimes we can do this. When Allah Azza wa Jalla says something, and we say, "No, but I think ABC." This is a lack of humility in front of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And the prerequisite to approaching the Quran is humility. This is a prerequisite. If we don't have humility, then we're not going to approach the Quran with a clean mind and a clean heart to accept what's happening. And look how beautiful this is. Surah Al-Fatiha, it's the first chapter of the Quran, right? In Surah Al-Fatiha, we say, "Guide us to the straight path." Surah Al-Baqarah defines what the straight path is. Okay, Surah Al-Baqarah defines and talks about Bani Israel, the lessons to be learned from them, the prophets. This is the straight path. You want the straight path? Learn Surah Al-Baqarah. The first verse of Surah Al-Baqarah is what? Alif, Lam, Mim. 3 letters in the Arabic alphabet. Every scholar of Tafsir, of Quranic exegesis, Quranic commentary, from the beginning until today, has commented on the wisdoms of these letters, but every single one resorted to 2 words. Allahu A'lam. Allah knows best. defining what the straight path is. This is relevant because Allah is telling us, put everything that you had in your mind, these preconceived notions, throw them behind you and approach the Quran with nothing. Because it's God talking and it's us listening. This is very important. As much as we know, Allah knows more. Let's go to the first verses revealed. The first verses revealed what Fatiha. The first verses revealed where? Iqra. Allah says, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord who created. Khalaq al-insan al-alaq. Created mankind from a clot of congealed blood. Iqra wa rabbuka al-akram. Read and your Lord is most generous. The one who taught with the pen. Taught man that which he does not know. It's an instruction to read, learn, to exercise our intellectual muscles. This is what the first 5 verses are. It's read, do your job. What are the 2 verses after it? Kalla inna al-insana la yatgha an ra'ahu istaghna. You're reading, you're doing your job, but watch out, because no, human being continues to transgress in that he sees himself as self-sufficient. Meaning that he doesn't need God, that his intellect, his thoughts are enough. Which they are. With all the knowledge that you gain, with all the wisdom that you gain throughout the years, Allah Azza wa Jalla knows the best, and we need to approach Allah and our relationship with Him this way. Does that make sense? This is a very important point. It's very, very important. The point of humility. When we're humble, you know what? And something very beautiful about humility, and we're going to see it later on in the verses. Behind every physical perception, so we see the world as it is, it's raining today, we see the earthquakes happening, we see the controversies overseas in the Middle East and in Africa today, right? Behind all this, there's a metaphysical reality behind it. Allah Azza wa Jalla has an intent behind all these things that we do not necessarily understand. The Prophet ﷺ, this is a very difficult point. It might be simple. The Prophet ﷺ says, مَا نَقَصَتْ صَدَقَةٌ مِنْ مَالٍ. Money doesn't decrease because of charity. At the end of the hadith, he says, the Prophet ﷺ says at the end of the hadith, وَمَنْ تَوَاضَعَ أَحَدًا لِلَّهِ إِلَّا رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ. No one who is humble before God, except that Allah will raise them if you're humble before God. What's the relationship between this part and the beginning of the hadith? Money doesn't decrease because of charity. Because logically, money decreases because of charity, right? You give money, if you have $10, you give $5, you have $5 left. But with Allah Azza wa Jalla, there's something called barakah. There's something called success of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Allah increases it in ways that we do not know. So be humble before Allah, even when you're giving money, and Allah will raise your status, right? Similarly, when we're approaching Allah Azza wa Jalla, then this is how we humble ourselves and do not put anything in front of Allah Azza wa Jalla. The second verse, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, so this is the first one, this is a relationship with the believer with his Lord, right? At the end of this verse, Allah says, and fear Allah, have taqwa of Allah. Right? Have you guys heard about taqwa before? We've heard this before. Taqwa, Allah says, this is interesting, Allah says taqwa, but He also says taqwa. He says, have taqwa of Allah. Then He says, have taqwa of Allah. Taqwa means, from muqay, means to put a barrier between you and something. So we said, taqwa means to put a barrier between you and the fire. How about taqwa? Does it mean to put a barrier between you and God? Can that be the meaning of taqwa? It's impossible, right? Taqwa means to put a barrier between you and the characteristics of Allah that are associated with punishment. Beware of Allah Azza wa Jalla because He's a jabbar, He's a mutakabbir. He's the one who shadidul iqab. You know, His punishment is severe, so be careful of that, right? Allah says ittaqullah because even if you do not put anything in front of Allah and His Messenger, continue to fear Allah and be conscious of Him in case you fall in that. Inna Allaha sami'un alim. The next Quranic tip. At the end of every verse, is anyone in the Hifz program here? Anybody? Okay. So if you're in a Hifz program, Allah says, we all know that when you're memorizing, the most difficult part is to remember which characteristics of Allah comes at the end of the verse. So you're saying, you're trying to remember which two. At the end of every verse, the words Allah uses, the characteristics, always match and are appropriate for that verse. So always reflect on it. Here Allah says, indeed Allah is the most hearing, the most knowing. So reflect, why hearing? Because He hears all that we say. Why knowing? Because He knows all that we think and that we do when we're trying to put something in front of Allah as His messenger. So hearing is our sayings. Knowing is our actions. What taqwa is our heart. So that your hearing and your sayings and your actions can be consistent with what's in your heart after you feel Allah. Right? This is how we're humble in front of Allah, not putting in front of anything in front of any object. The next verse. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا ترفعوا أصواتكم فوق صوت النبي ولا تجهروا له بالقول كجهر بعضكم لبعض أن تحبط أعمالكم وأنتم لا تشعرون. O you who believe, do not raise your voices above the voices of the Prophet, nor speak aloud when talking to him as you speak aloud to one another, lest your deeds should become to nothing while you do not even perceive. Remember, this is revealed about Umar and Abu Bakr. They were arguing, and this verse came down. The first verse is with regards to putting something in front of Allah and His Messenger, the people that are in charge of the Sharia. They gave us the Sharia. This one is specifically about the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Don't you raise your voices over him. He's not with us today, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this means when we say a hadith, don't try to say, well, but I think this way. Or when you say a hadith, stay quiet and listen to it. When you're in front of the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you give salam in a very soft voice. Don't raise your voices in front of him. Don't disrespect his tradition. Not only his sayings, but also his tradition, his sunnah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then Allah Azza wa Jalla gives a very difficult reward for those that raise their voices in front of the Prophet. He says, lest your deeds become to nothing and you do not even perceive it. That your deeds can become renderless if we do this. I want us to pay attention to something. In this verse is a very difficult reward for someone that does this. In the verses afterwards, at the end of the verse, Allah says that Allah is the most forgiving, most merciful. Why does He say most forgiving, most merciful later on? We're going to get to it. And why does He say your deeds can become renderless? Just keep that thought, inshallah. After this happened, it's recorded that Abu Bakr and Umar, when they speak to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, and the Prophet ﷺ said, what did he say? Raise your voices, right? Because they were so afraid. And so Allah Azza wa Jalla revealed the next verse. He said, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَغُضُّونَ أَصْوَاتَهُمْ عِنْدَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ امْتَحَنَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُمْ لِلتَّقْوَىٰ لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةٌ وَأَجْرٌ عَظِيمٌ. Those who lower their voices and speak softly in the presence of Allah's Messenger, those are the ones whom Allah has tested their hearts for piety. They shall have forgiveness and a great reward. Right? An important lesson is that Abu Bakr and Umar immediately responded to the call of the Prophet. Right? When the verse came down, immediately they changed. And when this happened, Allah says, we did this to test their hearts so they can have this taqwa. SubhanAllah. Right? Sometimes we don't understand why we get tests. Why our parents might be difficult with us. Why our children are difficult with us. Why all the tribulations are happening in our countries. Why tribulations are happening here. Right? Why does all of this happen? We can learn from this verse so that Allah Azza wa Jalla can prepare your hearts for taqwa. This is the sole purpose of tests. A filter, an expiation of sins, and a purification of our hearts so that we can be prepared to hold the flag of Islam and spread the message and be ambassadors of faith here in the United States of America and wherever we may be. This is the sole purpose of tests. So are we going to heed this call? And Allah Azza wa Jalla says, those who do it, they have a forgiveness and a great reward. Not only a